Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Napert, MASSCANN member liaison, and this is a virtual education village. This segment is produced and broadcasted thanks to the all-volunteer effect of MASSCANN organization. The Massachusetts Reform Coalition, well known as MASSCANN, is a registered 501c4 nonprofit organization dedicated to educating lawmakers, regulators, and the general public about the harms caused by a decades-long racist drug war. To find out more about us and maybe become a member if you would choose, please visit us at MASSCANN, that's MASSCANN.org. Follow us on our Facebook at facebook.com and on Instagram at masscann.org, MASSCANN.org. Today, here with our 25th Virtual Education Village discussion, the Virtual Education Village has become an integral component of the MASSCANN's educational mission in the time of coronavirus. Today's educational discussion is titled, What's New in Cannabinoids? With me today to discuss the multifaceted topic is John Nathan. John Nathan is a founder and president of Bay State Hemp, a Massachusetts-based extraction and processing facility with a focus on isolation and isomerization of minor cannabinoids from industrial hemp. John's mission to increase the availability of hemp-derived cannabinoids and educate the others on their benefits was inspired after finding a regimen of cannabinoids that was greatly assisted with managing his own anxiety and insomnia. John is also an active advocate and works with the Massachusetts Hemp Council on hemp and cannabis reform. I want to say good evening, and on behalf of the MASSCANN board and the organization, I would like to welcome you to the 25th Virtual Education Village. Good evening, John Nathan. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. First and foremost, thank you very much for reaching out to me and asking me to participate in this. Any opportunity to talk about what we do and what our mission is always a great benefit, not only for us, but for people that may not really understand how deep cannabis can go. My name is John Nathan. I became a medical marijuana patient back in 2016. I was a little late to the game. I personally had a pretty negative experience at first. THC and cannabis was helping me, but it was accompanying a extreme amount of paranoia. I had a lot of things that were coming up. I was just kind of responding. I had taken kind of a hiatus off of cannabis for some years. And when I came back to it, it was just a little overwhelming at first for me. And I'm not saying, I ate 5 milligrams and I was just having these paranoid attacks. And, I looked up online. I was like, how do you handle cannabis paranoia? And there was a whole bunch of things in every direction saying, do this, do that. But I found this article, and it's so funny how integral it is to my life now. But I found this article in Leafly where Neil Young had told Howard Stern in an interview that when he feels paranoid, he smells black pepper and it goes away. And I had read this really high. I walked over to the kitchen. I opened up a thing of black pepper. I smelled it and it worked. And part of me was like, all right, that was in my head. That was placebo, but I couldn't overpower the placebo. So I was able to say, okay, there's something here. And, I'm not an artistic person. I'm a math person. I come from IT and information security. So I see things as very black and white. So I couldn't just accept that black pepper stops paranoia. So I started reading, and turns out that it was the presence of beta-caryophyllene, a terpene that's not only found in black pepper in abundance, but also found in cannabis. And then started to read deeper about how that terpene, that beta-caryophyllene, acts on the CB2 receptors in the brain and can ease and calm, too much of a high. That brought me to incorporating CBD alongside using THC, just because CBD could be used to kind of quell the psychotropic effects. That's one of its really effective uses. There's a lot of people, I don't want to say people, there's a lot of out there, CBD will do this, CBD will do that. A lot of it's unfounded. A lot of it is rooted in truth. A lot of it is in theory. But the one thing that I can say it will do is that it will subdue the psychotropic effects of THC. That's that they work in tandem as part of an entourage effect. So I started using CBD. And then I started browsing through and looking, well, what else is in this plant? And I came across a small little article on something called CBN, cannabinol. And I wound up calling up every single dispensary in Massachusetts. Do you have CBN? No. You mean CBD? No. I mean this. And I found that there was none of it in 2016 in the medical program. And then finally, there was a dispensary that came out with capsules of CBN. And I, whenever I say this story, I want to stress that every single one of us have our own biodiversity. We have our own endocannabinoid systems, our own neurological responses to cannabinoids. So my experience is not what anybody else's would be. We do not market CBN after this. But when I first ate a CBN capsule, I ate about 10 milligrams, and it was the most profound experience of my life with cannabis. I remember sitting on my bed, and I'm looking around the room, and I couldn't figure out what I was feeling. And in retrospect, what I was feeling was the absence of anxiety. And again, this was for me. I'm not saying that anybody who takes 5 milligrams of CBN is going to have that type of experience. I'm not going to say that it cures anxiety or treats anxiety. I'm not going to say that it can't. But, I try not to deal with absolutes because, again, given that every single one of us are extremely different, that's the case. So I started going up every single Monday, driving 45 minutes to this dispensary, and I would literally buy every single CBN capsule. And then one day they told me they're not going to make it anymore because I was the only one buying it. And so that started to irritate me. I was loosely involved with a marijuana startup. I was very, very adamant about the future being the proliferation of minor and rare cannabinoids. And again, this isn't anti-THC. This is for them to be used in tandem with THC as an additional added benefit. And that just kind of was where I felt that the future would go. And one of the things with cannabis, especially on the business side of it, is you don't have 10 years of empirical data to go by. A lot of this, almost all marijuana activity has been done under isolated state programs. But one thing that you could see was that the more mature markets like California and Colorado had a huge influx of minor cannabinoid products. And that's how I knew from the business side of things that this is where Massachusetts is going to go. So, at the time that this was years back, but at the time, a kilogram of THC cost somewhere around $25,000 on the legal market. And there was a bottleneck, and there was a demand that the manufacturers couldn't even keep up with. So trying to convince a manufacturer to take this $25,000 kilogram of THC and to quote unquote destroy it to produce a niche cannabinoid that didn't have a lot of marketing behind it and wasn't going to have people lining up out the door, it just wasn't business savvy. And I understood that. But I still felt it was unfair. I still felt that if I'm a medical patient, I should be able to walk into a medical dispensary and be able to find any aspect of this plant that the science is allowed to bring to the forefront in abundance and not have to deal with this situation. So through, research and talking with chemists and people that were very well versed in this, I began the process in mid to late 2019 to form Bay State Hemp Company so that we could produce it from certified industrial hemp and then have the ability to supply these product manufacturers. So we set out to do that. We started building SOPs, and there was a law that was in the way that did not allow those kind of transfers. I was very lucky. I was at a seminar up in Boston called What the Hemp that was put on by Elevate Northeast. And Hillary King was there, and she had spoken up that she was trying to pass a bill that she had written that would allow interoperability between the hemp and marijuana industries, which, not to get too off track, but if you zoom out, they're both the cannabis plant. The only difference is what they're dominant in or what they've been trained to do. So whereas much conventional marijuana has been trained to produce as much THC as possible, which is typically the goal, that same sort of application can apply to other forms of cannabis. So I use the word hemp as a legal word, but in all reality, cannabis is cannabis is cannabis. You know what I mean? It's just, what is it dominant in? There's also fiber hemp. I could go on a tangent, but regardless, Hillary had spoken about this bill. As soon as the seminar ended, I immediately made a beeline over to her and I said, look, I'm willing to help you in absolutely any way with this. I've worked with the State House, and we set out to do that. We took a state senator through tours of hemp fields, and with the help of the Massachusetts Hemp Coalition, we all got together and we got that bill passed. It passed through the budget in 2020, and then we all worked sort of like an informal working group at the Cannabis Control Commission to get them to promulgate those regs and to publish an update formally allowing the transfer of hemp-derived cannabinoids. So the summary of what I do now, we're at a point where, I could comfortably say 90% and 95% of the minor and rare cannabinoids that you can find in any marijuana product in Massachusetts typically has passed through Bay State's hands. And, to bring it full circle, I was a patient that could not find what I needed, and decided to make it so that nobody else ever has to go through this again. It's a very satisfying feeling from a personal standpoint, that there's now options on a shelf where someone can find that magical combination. But I'm very lucky that I was in a position to do so, because the next patient that finds something that helps them and they're told that it's no longer available, they may not be as privileged or able to just start a company to make it themselves. But extremely long-winded, but that's a summary of who I am and what I'm doing here.
Well, and thank you, because people do know about THC and they know about CBD. Not many were aware up until recently about CBN, but what's new in cannabinoids, right? Because there are how many molecules that we don't even know about?
That we know of?
What are the ones we know about now other than those? And how can that benefit being that entourage of things that we already know about?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the key word that we know about. Especially, it's worth noting that even if you've been in this industry here for 6-7 years, you're still in the front seat. We're at the launch pad still for where this is going to go. And as far as I know, the number that I've always heard is 115 known cannabinoids. And to be quite honest with you, we could sit here and talk for 3 hours and only have to mention 8 of them. So there's so much that needs to be known. There's a lot of cannabinoids that we've isolated and produced that, manufacturers come to us and go, hey, could you tell me a reason why we would want to use this? And I say, hey, I can't give you anything concrete and I'm not saying about CBN, CBG, those, of course, there's some data behind it, but try to explain to somebody why they need to purchase cannabicitran, CBT. You know, we've isolated, we've isomerized it, we've produced it in bulk, but we still on the first batch. But that being said, what's new in cannabinoids is, you know, I did a, it's funny, I had met Hillary at that What the Hemp, and I wound up 2 years later speaking at it myself. But when I was there, I was asked one chief question of, what do you think the next big cannabinoid is? And my answer, which I still stand firm to today, is it's always going to be THC. That is the big cannabinoid. But the next big realization is not going to be a singular cannabinoid, but understanding that a collective therapeutic blend of them for targeted benefits and defined effects is going to be the future. And I think, the elephant in the room, that there's a little bit of a cannabis recession this year, that there's a lot of saturation, there's a lot of cultivators, there's a lot of people manufacturing products. And what I think people are realizing is that how many variations of a THC gummy does a market need? And it's very finite. You know what I mean? Like, you're limited 5 milligrams. That's what you can put in a adult use formulation. So what do you do beyond that? You can't increase strength. So you have to utilize everything else that the plant has to offer to create targeted products. And with that, the combinations are endless. You're no longer sitting there going, oh, well, no, you try this, 25 milligrams of that to 5 milligrams. You can create these elaborate or simple. Sometimes it just takes like the duality of 2 or 3. Like, our products are called trifecta. I use 3 cannabinoids per formulation. Each one has a purpose. I can explain why they're in there. And that's what's going to happen. So as the science starts to come out and more people get educated, the consumer is going to be going in going, wait a minute, like, do I want to eat those regular THC gummies, or do I want to eat THC with some CBG because I have some internal inflammation? You know what I mean? Or are they going to say, I would like to eat some, I would love the healing benefits of THC, but I really don't want to feel intoxicated. So maybe they're going to seek out a 2-to-1 CBD to THC, or 3-to-1 CBD to THC, or for anxiety or sleep. And I'm being very careful here because I can't make health claims, but I think I can kind of loosely insinuate that people are starting to realize that there's combinations of these cannabinoids that have profound effects. And that when the market starts to get saturated and mature, obviously there's going to be a decrease in pricing. And you're going to find yourself in a position where people walk into a dispensary and they go, well, I could get flower on the traditional market. Why would I buy this here? But what you can't get on the traditional market is the ability of a reliable quantified dose of isolated cannabinoid products or combined products. And that's where the dispensary will start to meet and exceed the definition of a medicinal herb, because none of these cannabinoids are new to anybody that has been smoking weed. Every single time you light a joint, you are inhaling THCA and THC and little bits of CBD and cannabinoids and analytes that we're not even ready to test for. So CBC, cannabichromene, pretty much anyone who smoked a joint has ingested cannabichromene. But the problem was, and this was huge in the beginning of hemp, there was a lot of stress on full spectrum extract. So directly out, pure distillate, take it with everything that came with it and mix that into a product. Well, you can't replicate that every single time reliably. Okay, so when it's 3% CBN this time and 5 the next time and 1.5 the next, there's nowhere in the medical realm where that's the application, where you just kind of hope that maybe this batch is going to test high in this. So by the advent of the isolation of these cannabinoids allows people to create a replicated dosing every single time. If you find out that, a dropper with 12.5 milligrams of CBD and 15 milligrams of CBC and 10 milligrams of CBN is what helps you. Well, now you can buy that tincture, you could buy that gummy, and you can buy it every time and get the same dose and be able to sit there and go, okay, I take 10 milligrams of this every night. And that's when we start to move into less into, you know, just getting high, which again, I get high. I am not denigrating that, but there is a massive demographic of people that do not know that they could or should be cannabis users, and they have every bit of validity in the conversation. Like, I always use the idea of like, look, there's one person here who wakes up every morning to their dab rig, okay, and they do not put that thing down until they pass out. And then there's somebody who once a week puts a bomb on their knees. And both of those people are cannabis users, and both of them deserve to walk into a dispensary and find what they need and be treated with the exact same sort of attention. And I think that's where the market is starting to shift to. In terms of what the buzz of the year would be, I would say Q1 and Q2, the first half, it was all CBN. Right now, it is all THCV. And you know, for clarity's sake, I know you probably definitely know what I'm about to say, but just to put it out there, THCV is not an isomer of THC. So you'll see a lot of these designer cannabinoids coming out of THCO acetate and delta 8 THC and delta 10 THC, and those are isomers of THC. THCV just happens to share the first three letters of the acronym. Molecularly, they are similar, but in their function and in psychotropic effects, they're very different. So THCV belongs to a family or a class of cannabinoids known as the varins, is what we refer to them as. So you have CBDV, THCV, and tetrahydrocannabivarin. Users report that what it tends to do is it helps with energy, helps with focus, helps with appetite suppression. You know, one of the most common sources that everyone has come in contact with, the one landrace strain that is famous for carrying a punch of THCV, is Durban poison. And even then, like when you find the variants or if it's apparent in a strain, even then it's still only around like, you know, 0.5%, 1%. Sometimes you get really lucky and you'll find something north of 3%. But now that we're able to isolate that cannabinoid and properly dose it on like a quantifiable milligram level, now you're starting to find that people are settling into the idea that they can take something in the morning that you know will give them a little bit of energy, but still give them maybe that high that they're looking for, or without the high. I mean, it doesn't have to be conjoined with THC, and then they're finding that, hey, if I'm going to get high, you know, in the morning and at night, well, in the morning I could do a morning blend, you know what I mean, with maybe some CBG and THCV and THC, and then at night maybe do some CBC and CBD and CBN with THC. And I think that sort of flexibility is it's an absolute gift to the consumer to be able to not only just walk in and find what level of stone they want to be, but hey, what else can I take care of with this? You know what I mean? One thing that is not a health claim, but a proven fact, is that CBD, even on its own isolated, has the ability to inhibit the sodium channels in the brain. There's two sodium channels, the NAV and the PTZ. And it can inhibit those sodium channels to prevent seizures, which I'm sure a lot of people know that was like the huge advent of CBD, was that it could be used for epileptic seizures. But so if I'm someone that has epilepsy, I think every gummy I take, I'm going to want to put a little bit of it in there. You know what I mean? Just for those benefits, or even just to treat it as an additional multivitamin. Like, you know, CBD on its own, taken in an isolate form, there's not much to it on its own, aside from what I just said. There's some neuroprotective benefits. If it's taken on a regular basis, it can curb, there's some studies saying it could curb anxiety and depression, but it has to be consistent, it has to be certain amounts. But for something like that, I see it as a multivitamin ingredient and not the star of the show. So creating, like, you know, these full spectrum edibles and tinctures and patches and drinks, which is emerging. I think right now I have never seen such a huge boondoggle of companies reaching out to us going, hey, we got to do this, we want to do that, and trying to think outside the box. And listen, when manufacturers start thinking outside the box, patients and adult customers win. You know what I mean? There's not been a lot of R&D in the last few years. And I'm not saying not everybody, I'm not pigeonholing. If anyone sees this, I'm sure, you know, I'm not talking about your operation, but in general, holistically, from zooming out, there hasn't been much R&D in Massachusetts up until this year. It's been a lot of, you know, very similar products. Of course, there's variety and some taste better. I like how these ones are made. These are vegan. These are, you know, all of that can be factored in. But the crux of it is that the market is maturing, and people are starting to look at this plant for a little bit more than just its THC content. Again, another long-winded response, but I believe I answered your question.
You did. Thank you. So, you know, with all of this that's going on now, and there are so many changes that are, you know, rapidly turning about as a 12-month period even passes us by, where do you think that maybe more work could happen in areas of cannabis and hemp laws that may still be hindering factors that still need to be worked on? What do you think?
Kind of a boring response, but I'll give it. For one, I believe that, especially for hemp and on the hemp side of things, that there needs to be a reevaluation of the acceptable THC levels between what constitutes hemp and marijuana. I personally believe 1% would be a fair rounded number, because the biggest problem here especially is, you know, if you do too good of a job at growing hemp, it's going to go hot. Like that's just a factor, like especially CBD dominant. There's CBDV and CBG dominant that do not go hot. But for CBD farmers and people that grow CBD dominant hemp, you know, if you get good sun and your water's clean and your soil is right, like it's going to go hot. That's what the plant does. You know, it has those, I believe they're called promiscuous enzymes in it that interact in the plant, and the same synthase that produces CBD also produces THC. So you can't ever really predict where that plant is going to go, whereas CBG and CBDV are on a completely different, I'm not a plant biologist, so I'm not going to pretend to be one. I'm literally just reiterating what people smarter than me have told me. But my other major complaint would be, I would love to see some sort of a national standard on testing, you know, analytical testing in particular. The amount of variance that you can find even within the same batch from a lab, it doesn't give a lot of confidence on the manufacturing side. It becomes very difficult. Sending stuff out for testing, we don't ever have to worry about pesticides or residual solvents, but I do have to worry about if that HPLC was calibrated properly and if they're QCing their machines. You know, we've had some stuff come back at you know, 98% pure, and I'm sitting there going, no, and I send it back again and it's 99.7. But like that first COA, that's the decision between whether someone chooses us or not. It also allows the consumer to get a real accurate picture of what they're putting in their body. Now, I know that cannabis isn't, you know, there's really nothing too detrimental when it comes to, you know, taking too much cannabis. But for some people, the difference between 3 and 5 milligrams is whether they can work that day. And I think we need to be mindful of that. So seeing some sort of a national standard for analytical testing. And then I guess my other complaint would be we need to fund way more research. You know, A lot of what I'm saying and insinuating, I'm not saying because I wouldn't make a health claim, but a lot of what I'm insinuating about these cannabinoids are based off of collective user experiences. And yeah, there's some studies here and there, but it's widely anecdotal. And, you know, I don't know about you, but me, I've been always taught to kind of dismiss anecdotal evidence. I mean, obviously, yes, you can take a survey, but I want to see something. I want to see empirical data. I want to see something peer reviewed that tells me what this combination will do. And, you know, we kind of got some vindication with that recently, and I just feel really good about this. But I had found a research paper from, I don't remember what country, it was in Europe, that had talked about a combination of CBD, CBC, and CBN being profound for sleep and antidepressant. And I used that as the basis for the formulation of Blackout, Trifecta Blackout. I guess I should plug a product. So our Trifecta Blackout is a non-THC sleep formula. And we use that kind of a formulation. Well, fast forward a year later, and it turns out just recently a published study came out, 1,800 people, double-blind sleep study, and that exact combination was proved efficacious for sleep. So, you know, I can't produce products without hard science. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that we can collectively pool people, but humans are fallible, and people will give you answers that you want to hear. Oh, it worked great. It worked great. Did this, did that. Well, I can't form on that. But peer-reviewed research, that's something I can hang my hat on and feel comfortable putting something together. We always get asked, because we supply cannabinoids and we have three products, you know, Relax, Blackout, and Focus. And people always say, oh, when's the next one coming out? Well, when the science gives me something, you know what I mean? Like, I need to see something. I'm not going to inundate the market with 500 combinations of these cannabinoids and not be able to discern between why each one needs to exist. So I think funded science will really not only accelerate product development and allow us to kind of see these molecules in the new light, but it also will kind of give us that, you know, real vindication that we are in the front seat, because we really don't know much. We've been speaking now for 30 minutes about cannabinoids, and I've mentioned 6. There's 115, you know? So this is so broad. I mean, there's even, I'm even a believer that there's some terpenes that could be classified as cannabinoids. So, you know, sorry to get long-winded with this, but I want to say it now. You're talking about beta-caryophyllene having activity on the CB2 receptors is a profound differentiation between it and other cannabinoids and other terpenes. So, yeah, if you know, eat limonene, there's some, you know, benefits of it. Most of the time, it also relies on other olfactory senses like smell to provide that calming. Like linalool will not have any direct CB2 receptor activity, but if you smell linalool and lavender while you're high, it will interact with the brain and cause a calming feeling. Not will, may, users report, sorry. But with something like beta-caryophyllene, where it does act on the CB2 receptors, and when you really zoom out and look at what a cannabinoid is, and the fact that they are aryl-substituted monoterpenes, they kind of operate the same. They come in different forms, and really, what is the differentiation? You know what I mean? Like, I guess the one thing that I have is that, you know, again, you can find beta-caryophyllene and black pepper, whereas these other cannabinoids naturally aren't typically found in nature. I'm sure there's somebody that will tell me about, you know, a mushroom in the Amazon that has CBG in it, you know, but I think that that's just really goes to show how little we all know collectively, you know? So I would love to see funded research, a national standard on analytical testing, and a less prohibitive cap on what constitutes hemp in terms of a THC level. So those are my 3 things. But remember, I'm in a niche category in cannabis. So I'm sure there's people that would go on about radiation and this and that. I'm not qualified to speak on those. So those are the 3 things I would say.
I appreciate it, John. Thank you so much for all the information.
No problem.
And you're absolutely right. There's so much more ahead of us. There's stuff we don't even know about yet. We're just kind of scratching the surface, would you be at this point? And I want to thank you very much for coming and sharing that. I appreciate you. Maybe we can have another discussion when we maybe can talk about hemp farming and maybe some of the logistics and hindrances that impede that factor as well, and what we might need to work on and what people might not know or be aware about. That would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you. John Nathan, we hope to speak to you again very soon.
Thank you so
for
much.
everything you've brought. We will continue some education with Virtual Ed Village. Check our webpage for the next posting of education. Thank you all. Have a good night and Merry Christmas.
Thank you.